You made a mistake, Connor, and it was your last.
The champagne flute in my hand was warm, which should have been my first warning. Corporate parties always serve warm champagne and cold revenge, though most people only notice the first part. I stood in the corner of the gleaming conference room, watching my wife Lena work the crowd like she owned the place, which, according to her boss Connor Riley, she practically did. Van Keller, right? The voice behind me carried the kind of Boston accent that screamed old money and newer arrogance. I turned to face Connor Riley himself, 6'2", silver at the temples, wearing a suit that cost more than my car payment. Lena's husband. The pause before husband lasted just long enough to be insulting. I smiled and extended my hand. That's me, the +1. Connor's handshake felt like he was testing my grip strength for some kind of corporate alpha male competition I hadn't signed up for. His eyes swept over my off-the-rack suit with the kind of dismissive glance usually reserved for expired milk. Lena tells me you work in, what was it, building maintenance? Something like that. I took a sip of the warm champagne and watched Lena across the room. She was laughing at something Julia Voss was saying, her head tilted back just enough to show off the necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary. The one she claimed to love but only wore to work events. I keep things running smoothly. Right. Connor's smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. Well, I'm sure that's important. Someone has to handle the grunt work while the real professionals make the big decisions. I nodded thoughtfully as if considering this profound wisdom. Absolutely. Someone has to know where all the bodies are buried. Something flickered in Connor's eyes, confusion maybe, or the first hint that this conversation wasn't going exactly as he'd planned. But before he could respond, Lena appeared at his side like she'd been summoned. Darling. She kissed my cheek with the kind of mechanical affection you'd show a distant relative. I see you've met Connor. Isn't he wonderful? He's been such a mentor to me. The way she said mentor made my teeth itch. Lena had always been ambitious, but lately her ambition had developed some interesting new dimensions. Like staying late at the office 3 nights a week. Like taking weekend strategy sessions that apparently required overnight trips to conference centers with very flexible booking policies. Your wife is exceptional, Connor said, his hand settling on Lena's lower back with the casual possessiveness of a man who'd clearly forgotten he was talking to her husband. Truly exceptional. I've been thinking about promoting her to senior management. She has such natural leadership qualities. She's always been good at getting what she wants, I agreed. Lena's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Van's being modest. He's very supportive of my career advancement. That's what marriage is about, right? Connor's grin was all teeth now. Supporting each other's growth. Though I imagine it must be challenging, being married to someone so much more successful. The insult hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Around us, the party continued. Junior executives laughing too loudly at senior executives' jokes, administrative assistants clustering near the appetizer table, the usual corporate theater. But in our little triangle, the temperature had dropped several degrees. It has its moments, I said mildly. I'm sure. Connor stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something else. The particular scent of a man who'd never been told no. But here's the thing, Van. Lena and I, we work very closely together, very intimately. Long hours, you understand, high-pressure situations. Sometimes a man has to wonder if his wife's loyalty is really at home. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Lena was staring at her shoes, her face flushed either from embarrassment or excitement. With her, it was always hard to tell the difference. Are you suggesting something specific? I asked. Connor's laugh was loud enough to turn heads. I'm not suggesting anything, buddy. I'm telling you, your wife belongs to this company now. She belongs to me. And if you've got a problem with that, he leaned forward and spat directly in my face. The saliva hit my cheek and started its slow slide toward my jaw. The room seemed to freeze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the background music felt muted. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Julia Voss gasp. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and carefully wiped my face clean. The whole time, Connor stood there grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Well, I said finally, folding the handkerchief and putting it back in my pocket. That's certainly one way to make a point. Van, Lena started, but Connor cut her off. Your husband understands, don't you, Van? This is how the real world works. The strong take what they want, and the weak learn to live with it. He put his arm around Lena's waist and pulled her against his side. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Lena looked at me for a long moment. Her green eyes, the same ones I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, were completely cold. That's right, she said quietly. By tonight, darling. The words hit harder than the spit had. By tonight. As in, by tonight she'd be with him. As in, by tonight our marriage would be officially over. As in, she'd already made her choice and was just letting me know as a courtesy. I nodded slowly like I was processing this information. Like I was the pathetic, defeated husband they clearly thought I was. I see, I said. Well, I suppose that settles things. It does. Connor's grip on Lena tightened possessively. And just so we're clear on the new arrangement, you might want to start looking for a new place to live. Lena's going to need her space. Of course. I smiled at him, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to confuse him slightly. Just one small thing, Connor. What's that? When you clean out your office tomorrow, don't forget to tell the director you're fired. The confusion on his face deepened. What the heck are you talking about? You'll figure it out. I turned to Lena and gave her the same warm smile. Have a wonderful evening, sweetheart. Both of you. I walked away, leaving them standing there, looking like they'd just been told a joke in a foreign language. Behind me, I could hear the party slowly resuming, conversations picking up, nervous laughter, the clink of glasses. But I was already mentally somewhere else, planning my next move. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you a tremendous tactical advantage. People make assumptions, they get careless, they reveal more than they should. And Connor Riley had just revealed everything I needed to know. I walked out into the cool October evening, got in my car, and drove home to our empty house. Lena wouldn't be coming home tonight. She'd made that clear. Which was perfect, because I had work to do. I wiped the spit off my face and smiled. Let them think I'd lost. It's always funnier that way. I woke up alone, which wasn't exactly a surprise. What was surprising was the sound of Lena's key in the front door at 7:30 in the morning, followed by unfamiliar footsteps and the low murmur of voices. I stayed in bed listening to them move around downstairs, Lena's heels clicking on the hardwood, a deeper voice that had to be Connor, and what sounded like a third person. The refrigerator opened and closed, coffee brewing, the comfortable sounds of people making themselves at home. 20 minutes later, Lena appeared in the bedroom doorway. She was wearing the same black dress from last night, but somehow she looked more put together than I felt, and I'd actually slept in a bed. We need to talk, she said. Good morning to you, too. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. Coffee smells good. Did you bring enough for everyone? Her jaw tightened. Get dressed and come downstairs. We have company. Let me guess. Connor and his lawyer. Just get dressed, Van. I took my time showering and getting ready, partly because I knew it would irritate her, and partly because I wanted to think through what was about to happen. Lena wasn't the type to waste time on dramatic confrontations. If she was here with backup, it meant she wanted this over quickly and cleanly. When I finally made it downstairs, I found them arranged in my living room like they were conducting a board meeting. Connor sat in my favorite chair, looking like he owned the place. Lena perched on the edge of the couch, a manila folder in her lap. The third person was a thin man in an expensive suit who had lawyer written all over him. Van, Lena said, standing up. This is David Morrison, my attorney. Morrison rose and extended his hand. Mr. Keller, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Are you? I shook his hand and looked around the room. Well, this is cozy. Should I make more coffee? That won't be necessary, Lena said crisply. She opened the folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences. I took the papers and flipped through them casually. Standard, no-fault divorce paperwork, but with some interesting additions. Lena was asking for the house, half my retirement account, and alimony. She was also claiming that I'd been emotionally harmful and controlling. Emotional misuse? I looked up at her. That's creative. You've been increasingly hostile and paranoid, she said, her voice taking on the tone she used in HR meetings, making accusations about my work relationships, trying to control my schedule, creating a toxic home environment. I asked where you were when you didn't come home until 3 in the morning. See? Connor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Controlling behavior. Lena deserves better than that. I looked at him sitting in my chair in my house, lecturing me about my wife's needs, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. You're right, I said. She does deserve better. The three of them exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't the reaction they'd been expecting. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Morrison said. If you sign the papers today, we can expedite the process. Have everything finalized within 60 days. 60 days? I nodded thoughtfully. That's efficient. Van, Lena said, and for just a moment her voice softened. I know this is hard, but we both know this marriage has been over for a long time. We're just making it official. When did you know? I asked. That it was over, I mean. She hesitated, glancing at Connor. Does it matter? Humor me. 6 months ago, she said finally, and maybe longer. We just grew apart. 6 months. I did some quick mental math. That would be right around the time you started working late with Connor. This isn't about Connor, she said quickly. Isn't it? I looked at him, still sprawled in my chair like he belonged there. What do you think, Connor? Is this about you? His smile was all predator. This is about Lena finally realizing what she's worth, what she deserves. A real man, not some what? Some nobody who fixes broken toilets for a living. The insult hung in the air. Morrison looked uncomfortable, probably wondering if his client's boyfriend was about to torpedo the clean divorce they'd planned. Lena was staring at Connor with something that might have been admiration or might have been hunger. A nobody, I repeated. That's what you think I am? That's what you are, Connor said. Face it, Van. You're a maintenance worker married to an executive. You were punching above your weight from day one, and now reality is catching up. I nodded slowly, then walked over to the kitchen counter where I kept a pen. I signed the divorce papers without reading them, my signature bold and clear on every page that required it. There, I said, handing the papers back to Morrison. All done. The silence in the room was deafening. They'd clearly expected more of a fight, more drama, more of the emotional breakdown that would justify Lena's narrative about my instability. That's it? Lena asked. That's it, I smiled at her. You want a divorce? You've got it. You want the house? It's yours. You want to be with Connor? Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy together. Connor was frowning now, like he'd bitten into an apple and found something unexpected. Just like that? Just like that. I looked around the room one more time, at the furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the mantel, the life we'd built, and were now dismantling with the stroke of a pen. Though I should probably mention one thing. What's that? Morrison asked. You might want to update your resume, Connor. I have a feeling you're going to need it. He laughed, that same arrogant bark from the night before. Right, because you're going to get me fired. You and what army? Just me, I said. But then again, I've always been good at working alone. They left 20 minutes later, taking their papers and their smugness with them. I watched from the front window as Connor helped Lena into his BMW, his hand lingering on her back just a little too long. They were talking animatedly, probably about how easy I'd been to handle, how pathetic my surrender had been. Let them talk. Let them celebrate. Let them think they'd won. I had work to do. She said she wanted to be his. I decided to give her everything she asked for, and then some. Monday morning, I arrived at Lena's office building at exactly 8 o'clock. The security guard in the lobby, a thick-set ex-cop named Artie Russo, looked up from his newspaper and grinned. Well, well, look who's back from vacation. Hey, Artie. I signed the visitor log with a flourish. Miss me? Like a hole in the head. He buzzed me through the turnstile. Your wife's been telling everyone you're getting divorced. News travels fast around here. Faster than gossip at an Irish wake. Artie leaned forward conspiratorially. She's also been telling people you're some kind of deadbeat, maintenance worker who couldn't handle being married to a successful woman. Is that what she's saying? That's what she's saying. Connor's been backing up her story too. Real sympathetic, that one. Talking about how hard it must be for a woman like Lena to be tied down to a man with no ambition. I nodded thoughtfully. And what do you think, Artie? His grin widened. I think Connor Riley's about to learn the difference between maintenance and management. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, where the executive offices were located. The reception area was all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate visitors and impress clients. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who'd always been friendly to me, looked up with surprise. "Mr. Keller, I didn't expect to see you here. I have some business to take care of," I said. "Is Mr. Riley in his office?" "He's in the conference room with Mrs. Grant Keller and the senior staff. They're having their Monday morning meeting." "Perfect. Don't announce me. I want to surprise them." Sarah looked uncertain. "I'm not sure that's—" "It's fine," I assured her. "Trust me." I walked down the hallway toward the conference room, passing the offices of people I'd worked with for years. Most of them didn't know who I really was. To them, I was just Lena's husband, the maintenance guy, who occasionally showed up to company events. Only a select few knew the truth. The conference room had glass walls, so I could see them before I entered. Connor sat at the head of the table, gesturing expansively as he spoke. Lena was to his right, taking notes on her tablet. Julia Voss sat across from her, nodding along to whatever Connor was saying. The rest of the senior staff filled out the table. Department heads, project managers, the people who actually ran the day-to-day operations. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. "Sorry I'm late," I said cheerfully. "Traffic was homisickty." The room went dead silent. Connor's mouth was still open from whatever he'd been saying. Lena's face went pale, then flushed red. Julia actually dropped her pen. "Van," Lena said finally, "what are you doing here?" "Working," I said, taking the empty seat at the foot of the table. "Same as always." Connor found his voice. "You need to leave. This is a private meeting for senior staff only." "Is it?" I looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. "Well, that's awkward, because according to my calendar, this is the weekly operations review. And since I'm the one who actually reviews the operations, I probably should be here." "Your calendar?" Julia laughed nervously. "Van, I think there's been some kind of mistake." "The only mistake," I said, pulling out my phone and opening my work email, "was assuming you all knew who you were working for." I turned the phone so they could see the screen. The email was from Robert Roth, the company's reclusive owner and CEO, sent to the senior staff distribution list. The subject line read, "Organizational changes. Effective immediately." Connor leaned forward, squinting at the small screen. "What is this supposed to be?" "Read it out loud," I suggested. "I think everyone should hear this." His face was getting redder by the second, but he took the phone and began to read. "Effective immediately, all departmental operations will report directly to Evan Keller, Director of Strategic Operations. Ms. Keller has been managing our core business functions for the past 3 years and will now be assuming full operational authority. All personnel decisions, budget allocations, and project approvals must be cleared through Mr. Keller's office." The silence in the room was so complete, I could hear the air conditioning humming. "This is impossible," Lena whispered. "Van works in maintenance." "Actually," I said, taking my phone back, "I work in management. I have for 3 years. The maintenance thing was just cover. Mr. Roth prefers to keep a low profile, and he wanted someone he trusted to keep an eye on the day-to-day operations without drawing attention." "You're lying," Connor snarled. "This is some kind of fake email, some pathetic attempt to—" His phone buzzed. Then Lena's, then Julia's, then every phone in the room, all receiving the same email at the same time. "Of course," I continued conversationally, "this does mean there will be some changes around here, starting with personnel reviews. I've been documenting some concerning behavior patterns over the past few months." I opened my laptop and pulled up a file labeled HR Violations, Q3 Review. The document was 43 pages long. "Let's see," I said, scrolling through the contents. "Connor, you've been charging personal expenses to the company credit card. Dinners, hotel rooms, weekend trips that were supposedly business-related but involved no actual business. That's embezzlement." "That's BS," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Page 12 has the receipts," I said helpfully, "including the weekend you and Lena spent at the Ritz-Carlton in Newport, charged as a client development retreat. Interesting client development, considering you never met with any clients." Lena was staring at the table, her face burning with embarrassment. "Then there's the harassment issue," I continued. "Julia, you've been systematically undermining the women in your department, creating a hostile work environment, and retaliating against anyone who complained. I have statements from 6 different employees." Julia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Those women are just what? Just tired of being treated like garbage by their supervisor?" I turned to the rest of the table. And Lena, as head of HR, you've been covering up these complaints instead of investigating them. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. Van, please, Lena said quietly. Can we discuss this privately? I think we're past private discussions, I said. Especially considering that all three of you have been telling people I'm some kind of deadbeat maintenance worker. That's defamation of character, by the way. Creates a hostile work environment for me. Connor slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. You can't just waltz in here and what? Do my job? I closed the laptop and looked around the room. Here's how this is going to work. Connor, you're suspended pending a full investigation into your expense account irregularities. Julia, you're being transferred to a non-supervisory role while we review the harassment complaints. And Lena, I paused, letting the moment stretch out. Lena, you're being reassigned to our Portland office, effective immediately. I hear Maine is lovely this time of year. Portland? She whispered. Van, you can't. I can and I am. Consider it a lateral move. Same title, same pay, just different scenery. You'll love it. Very quiet, very isolated. Perfect place to think about your career choices. The look on their faces when they realized who I was, priceless. But the night was still young. The parking garage beneath the office building was poorly lit and mostly empty at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I'd stayed late to catch up on actual work, the kind of strategic planning and operational oversight that had been my real job for the past 3 years. It felt good to drop the pretense, to finally work openly instead of from the shadows. What didn't feel good was the sound of footsteps echoing behind me as I walked toward my car. Van, hey, Van! I turned to see Connor striding toward me, his face flushed with anger and what looked like several drinks. Behind him, keeping pace but trying to look casual, was Glenn Morrison, not the lawyer from the divorce proceedings, but a different Morrison entirely. This Glenn was built like a linebacker and had the kind of facial scars that suggested he'd learned his people skills in prison. Gentlemen, I said pleasantly. Working late? Cut the BS, Connor snapped. He was close enough now that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. You think you're real clever, don't you? Think you can just destroy people's lives and walk away? I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just doing my job. You know, the one I've had for 3 years while you thought I was cleaning toilets. Your job? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your job is whatever I say it is, and right now, your job is to fix this mess you've created. I don't think that's how organizational hierarchies work, Connor. Glenn stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Maybe you need someone to explain it to you. I looked at Glenn, really looked at him. 6'4", probably 250, hands like ham hocks. The kind of man who solved problems with violence because thinking was too much work. Let me guess, I said. You're here to convince me to reverse my personnel decisions through the power of physical intimidation. Smart man, Glenn said. Not that smart, apparently. Because if I were really smart, I would have anticipated this and taken precautions. Connor's eyes narrowed. What kind of precautions? I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. It was open to a video call with Artie Russo, who was sitting in the security office 15 floors above us. Hey, Artie, I said. How's the view from up there? Artie's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but clear. Real good, Van. I can see all three of you just fine. Amazing what these new security cameras can pick up, even in low light. Glenn took a step back, looking around for the cameras he'd missed. The thing about being in charge of operations, I explained, is that you get to know all the building systems. Security cameras, for instance. We upgraded them last month. Now they record everything in high definition and upload it automatically to the cloud. You son of a witch, Connor snarled. Now. That's no way to talk to your boss. I put the phone away but kept the call connected. So, gentlemen, what was it you wanted to discuss? For a moment, I thought Connor might actually walk away. His face cycled through several expressions, rage, frustration, calculation. But then, Glenn whispered something in his ear, and his expression hardened into something uglier. You know what, Van? You're right. I'm not your boss anymore. Which means I don't have to pretend to be professional. He swung at me. I'd been expecting it, so I was already moving when his fist cut through the air where my head had been. Connor was drunk and angry, which made him predictable. He stumbled forward, off balance, and I helped him along with a gentle push that sent him sprawling across the hood of someone's Honda. Glenn was a different problem. He was sober, experienced, and had about 60 pounds on me. But he was also overconfident. the way big men often are when they think they're fighting someone smaller and weaker. He charged me like a bull, arms outstretched, planning to wrap me up and squeeze until something broke. I sidestepped at the last second and stuck out my foot. Glenn's momentum carried him past me and into a concrete pillar with a satisfying thud. "Artie," I called out, "are you getting all this?" "Crystal clear," came the reply. "Should I call the police?" "Not yet. Let's see how this plays out." Connor had recovered from his encounter with the Honda and was advancing on me again, this time with a tire iron he'd found somewhere. His face was cut and bruised from where he'd scraped it on the car's antenna. "I'm going to beat you to death," he panted, "and then I'm going to take everything you have left." "That's a very specific threat," I observed. "You might want to be careful about making threats on camera." "Forget the camera." He swung the tire iron in a wide arc, aiming for my head. I ducked under it and grabbed his wrist, using his own momentum to spin him around and slam him face first into the side of my car. The tire iron clattered to the ground. Glenn was getting back to his feet, shaking his head to clear it. A streak of red was running from his nose where he'd met the pillar, but he didn't look like he was ready to quit. "You know," I said conversationally, "this really isn't necessary. We could have handled this like civilized adults." "Civilized?" Connor spat a bit of red onto the concrete. "You ruined my life." "I documented your crimes and reported them to the appropriate authorities. That's not ruining your life. That's called consequences." Glenn made another run at me, this time trying to tackle me around the waist. I grabbed the tire iron Connor had dropped and brought it down on Glenn's shoulder, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make him reconsider his career choices. He yelped and rolled away, clutching his shoulder. "Artie," I called out, "I think now would be a good time for those police." "Already on their way," Artie replied. "ETA 3 minutes. Connor was leaning against my car, breathing hard and hurt and scraped from several scrapes. Glenn was sitting on the ground, testing his shoulder mobility and looking like he was reconsidering his life choices. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, straightening my tie. "The police are going to arrest you both for assault. The security footage will corroborate my story that I was defending myself. Connor, your suspension is now a termination, and I'll be filing criminal charges for the embezzlement. Glenn, I don't know who you are or why you're here, but assaulting a corporate executive is a felony." "This isn't over," Connor wheezed. "Actually, it is." I pulled out my phone again and showed him a different screen, this one displaying a legal document. "Restraining order, filed this afternoon. You're not allowed within 500 feet of me, my home, or this building. Violating it is another felony." The sound of sirens echoed through the parking garage, getting closer. "The thing about being underestimated," I said, "is that it gives you time to plan ahead. You two spent so much time thinking I was a nobody that you never considered what would happen if you were wrong." The police arrived with their usual efficiency: 2 patrol cars, 4 officers, and a lot of questions. I gave them my statement, while Artie emailed them the security footage. Connor and Glenn gave their own versions of events, but it's hard to argue with high-definition video evidence. They were both arrested and charged with assault. Connor got an additional charge for violating the restraining order, which had technically gone into effect at 5 p.m. Glenn, it turned out, had an outstanding warrant for unpaid child support, which complicated his evening considerably. I watched them being loaded into separate patrol cars, then walked over to inspect the damage to my car, a few scratches on the paint where Connor had scraped against it, but nothing serious. "You okay?" Artie asked, appearing at my elbow. "Fine," I said. "Thanks for the backup." "Anytime," he grinned. "Though I got to say, that was some pretty fancy footwork for a maintenance guy." "Good thing I'm not actually a maintenance guy." "Good thing," he agreed. "You heading home?" "In a minute." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Lena's number. She answered on the second ring. "Van, what's wrong?" "It's almost 10 o'clock. Just thought you should know," I said. "Connor won't be coming home tonight. He's been arrested." Silence on the other end of the line. Arrested for what? Assault, violating a restraining order, and embezzlement. The assault charge is from when he and his friend tried to beat me up in the parking garage. The other charges are from his creative approach to expense reporting. More silence. "Van," she said finally, "what have you done?" "My job," I said. "The one I've been doing for 3 years while you thought I was fixing broken toilets. Sleep well, Lena. You've got a big day tomorrow. Moving trucks are expensive, and Portland's a long drive." I hung up and got in my car. The engine started smoothly, despite the scratches on the paint. Connor's car was still leaking oil when I left. Small victories, but this was just the warm-up. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Flanagan's pub, nursing a beer and listening to Janine Murphy hold court behind the bar. Janine was a treasure, 60 years old, sharp as a tack, and plugged into the gossip network of every office building within a 5-mile radius. If you wanted to know who was sleeping with whom, who was embezzling what, or who was about to get fired, Janine was your source. So there I was, she was saying to a cluster of after-work drinkers, serving drinks at the Marriott downtown, when who walks in but your ex-wife and that Julia woman, looking like they'd been hit by a truck. I looked up from my beer with interest. Lena was at the Marriott? Oh, honey, was she ever? Janine leaned across the bar, lowering her voice to the conspiratorial whisper that meant really good gossip was coming. She's been staying there since her boyfriend got arrested. Apparently the lease on his fancy apartment was in the company's name, and when he got fired, she got evicted, I finished. Faster than you can say corporate credit card fraud. But here's the really interesting part. She and Julia were meeting with some lawyer, trying to figure out how to sue you for wrongful termination or some such nonsense. Sue me, I laughed. On what grounds? That's what the lawyer wanted to know. Apparently, they spent 2 hours trying to explain how you'd somehow framed poor innocent Connor for embezzlement, and the lawyer kept asking for evidence, which they didn't have on account of Connor actually being guilty as sin. One of the other patrons, a guy named Mike, who worked in accounting at a firm downtown, shook his head in amazement. I still can't believe Van was running that whole company. I mean, no offense, Van, but you always seem so ordinary, I suggested. I was going to say normal, but yeah, like you never acted like a big shot or anything. That was kind of the point, I said. Hard to keep an eye on things when everyone knows they're being watched. Janine refilled my beer without being asked. So what happens now with Lena and Julia, I mean? Well, Lena's supposed to be in Portland by now, starting her new position. Julia's been transferred to our Buffalo office. Turns out we needed someone to manage our filing systems, and she's uniquely qualified. Buffalo in November, Mike whistled. That's cold. It builds character, I said mildly. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and frowned. The message was from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the old warehouse on Harbor Street. Come alone, L. Lena. She was supposed to be in Maine, starting her new job and her new life. The fact that she was still in town, sending cryptic messages about warehouse meetings, suggested that her transition to Portland hadn't gone as smoothly as I'd hoped. Everything okay? Janine asked, noticing my expression. Just work stuff, I said, finishing my beer and leaving a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the gossip update. Anytime, honey. You be careful out there. The warehouse district was mostly empty at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. Harbor Street was lined with old brick buildings that had been converted into artists' studios, tech startups, and the kind of trendy restaurants that charged $30 for a hamburger. The warehouse Lena had specified was at the far end of the street, a squat, ugly building that had been abandoned for years. I parked across the street and sat in my car for a few minutes, watching the building for signs of movement. The smart thing would be to call Artie or the police, or just drive away and pretend I'd never gotten the message. But curiosity has always been one of my weaknesses, and I wanted to know what Lena thought she could accomplish with a clandestine meeting in an abandoned warehouse. The front door was unlocked, which should have been my second warning. The first had been agreeing to come at all. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty except for some old machinery and a few pieces of furniture that looked like they'd been abandoned by the previous tenant. Lena was standing in the center of the space, illuminated by a single overhead light that cast harsh shadows across her face. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. The confident, polished executive I'd been married to was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate and dangerous. "Hello, Van," she said. "Lena." I stayed near the door, keeping my escape route clear. "I thought you were in Portland." "I was, for about a week." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out my new position was managing the mail room in a building with 12 employees. Not exactly the executive track I was promised. "You embezzled company funds and covered up complaints about inappropriate workplace conduct," I said. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? I never embezzled anything. You signed off on Connor's expense reports. You approved the charges for those weekend getaways, those dinners, those hotel rooms. That makes you an accessory. I didn't know what he was doing. You knew exactly what he was doing. You were there for most of it." She stared at me for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions. Anger, frustration, something that might have been regret. You destroyed my life, she said finally. You destroyed your own life. I just documented it. We were married for 8 years, Van. 8 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me, I said quietly. Right up until you chose him over me. Right up until you let him spit in my face and told me you'd be with him by tonight. That was, she shook her head. That was just talk. Just Connor being Connor. You never meant what? To humiliate me in front of a room full of people? To move in with him the same night? To serve me divorce papers and try to take everything I had? I was angry. No, I said. You were greedy. You saw an opportunity to trade up, and you took it. The only problem was that you didn't do your homework first. She took a step toward me, and I noticed that her hands were shaking. Van, please, we can fix this. We can go back to the way things were. Can we? Can you unsign the divorce papers? Can you unsleep with your boss? Can you undestroy 8 years of marriage for a promotion that didn't even exist? The divorce isn't final yet, she said desperately. We could stop it. Start over. I made a mistake, but people make mistakes. That's what marriage is about. Forgiveness. I looked at her standing there in the harsh light, pleading for a second chance she didn't deserve, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. You're right, I said. People make mistakes. But what you did wasn't a mistake, Lena. It was a choice. A series of choices. And now you have to live with the consequences. Her face hardened. Fine. If you won't do this the easy way, we'll do it the hard way. What's that supposed to mean? She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It was a recording app, and it had been running the entire time we'd been talking. I've been recording this conversation, she said. You just admitted to framing me and Connor, to misusing your position to destroy our careers. That's wrongful termination, misuse of power, maybe even criminal conspiracy. I stared at her for a moment, then started laughing. What's so funny? You, I said, you're threatening to blackmail me with a recording of me telling the truth about your crimes. It's not about the truth, Van, it's about perception. How do you think it's going to look when people hear that recording? The vengeful ex-husband who used his corporate position to destroy his wife's life? Probably about the same as it looked when you and Connor were embezzling company funds. That's not... Lena, I interrupted, pulling out my own phone. Do you remember what I told Connor about always being prepared? Her face went pale. This warehouse has been under surveillance for the past 6 months, I said. The city's been trying to figure out who's been using it as an illegal substance distribution center. They installed cameras last month. High-definition, night vision, full audio recording. I showed her my phone screen, which displayed a live feed from the warehouse security system. We were both clearly visible, along with a timestamp and audio levels that showed the system was recording everything. But more importantly, I continued, you just confessed to attempting to blackmail a corporate executive. That's a felony, Lena. And unlike your other crimes, this one's being recorded by the city police department. She stared at the phone screen in horror. You're lying. Call them and ask. The number for the surveillance unit is 555-147. Tell them you're calling about the Harbor Street warehouse operation. They'll be very interested to hear from you. For a moment, I thought she might actually make the call. But then, her shoulders sagged, and she seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to go to Portland, I said. I want you to do your job, keep your head down, and stay out of my life. I want you to stop trying to blame other people for the choices you made. And I want you to understand that this, all of this, is what you chose when you decided I wasn't good enough for you. Van, we're done here, Lena. We've been done since the moment you let Connor spit in my face. The only difference is that now you know it too. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and Lena, next time you want to threaten someone, you might want to make sure you're not doing it in a police surveillance zone. I left her standing there in the harsh light, staring at her phone, like it might somehow change what had just happened. They wanted proof? I gave them enough to last a lifetime. 2 months later, I was back at Flanagan's Pub, celebrating the successful completion of the largest project in our company's history. The Portland office, where Lena was supposedly working, had just landed a major government contract, and the Buffalo office, where Julia was managing filing systems, had streamlined their operations enough to save the company $2 million annually. So let me get this straight, Artie said. raising his beer in a mock toast. You sent your ex-wife and her friend to the 2 offices that ended up being the most successful this quarter. Funny how that works out, I said. Janine leaned across the bar, grinning. You know what I heard? I heard Lena's actually good at her job when she's not busy sleeping with her boss and covering up harassment complaints. People can surprise you. I agreed. And Julia apparently has a real talent for organization, Mike added. Who knew? It's amazing what people can accomplish when they focus on work instead of office politics. My phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Van Keller. Mr. Keller, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Boston Police Department. We need to talk to you about Lena Grant and Julia Voss. I felt a chill run down my spine. What about them? They've been arrested for breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and destruction of property. They were caught on security cameras breaking into your house last night. I blinked in surprise. My house? But I was at your apartment downtown, yes. We checked, but they apparently didn't know you'd moved. They broke into your old house, the one that's currently owned by the bank pending the divorce settlement. What were they looking for? According to their statements, they were trying to find evidence that you'd frame them for embezzlement. They seemed to think you had some kind of secret files or recordings that would prove their innocence. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, after all the evidence, all the documentation, all the witnesses, they were still convinced that they were the victims of some elaborate conspiracy. Detective, I said, I think there may be some confusion. Lena is supposed to be working in our Portland office, and Julia is in Buffalo. They shouldn't even be in Boston. Well, they're here now, and they're asking to speak with you. I don't think that's a good idea. Actually, Mr. Keller, I think it might be. They've made some pretty serious accusations about you, and we'd like to get your side of the story. Plus, there's something else you should know. What's that? They weren't alone. Connor Riley was with them. He's also been arrested. That stopped me cold. Connor? I thought he was in jail. He made bail last month. Apparently, he's been staying with Ms. Grant at a motel outside the city, planning this break-in for weeks. I closed my eyes and rubbed my forehead. Detective, I'll be right there. The Boston Police Headquarters was exactly as depressing as I remembered from the last time I'd been there. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, and the lingering smell of bad coffee and worse decisions. Detective Chen turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked like she'd heard every lie and excuse in the book. Mr. Keller, she said, leading me to an interview room. Thank you for coming in. I have to say, this is one of the more interesting cases I've worked on lately. How so? Well, we've got 3 people who broke into a house looking for evidence of a crime that, according to our investigation, they actually committed themselves. It's like something out of a bad movie. She opened a file and spread out several photographs on the table. They showed the interior of my old house, the one Lena had gotten in the divorce settlement but hadn't bothered to actually move into. The living room was trashed, furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere. The home office looked like a tornado had hit it. They did quite a number on the place, Detective Chen said. Tore apart every room, looking for what they called Van's secret files. When we arrested them, they were in the basement, trying to break into a safe that turned out to be empty. It's always been empty, I said. I bought it as a fire safe for important documents, but I keep those in a safety deposit box. That's what we figured, but here's the interesting part. When we searched them, we found these. She pulled out 3 evidence bags containing what looked like USB drives and a small recording device. They brought their own evidence, she said. Recordings of conversations with you, copies of emails, financial documents. They were planning to plant them in your house and then discover them during the break-in. I stared at the evidence bags in disbelief. They were going to frame me? That was the plan, apparently. Create fake evidence of you embezzling money or covering up crimes, then call in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity at your old house. When we searched the place, we'd find their planted evidence and arrest you. I shook my head. That's insane. It's also stupid, illegal, and poorly planned. The recording device they brought? It's the same model used by our undercover units. Serial number traces back to a theft from an evidence locker 6 months ago. Turns out Mr. Riley has a friend who works in evidence processing. So they committed another crime to try to frame me for the crimes they actually committed. That's about the size of it. Oh, and Mr. Keller, you might want to know that we've been investigating your embezzlement allegations for the past 2 months. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been going through your company's books with a fine-toothed comb. My stomach dropped. And they found exactly what you said they'd find. Unauthorized expenses, falsified reports, misappropriated funds. Your documentation was thorough and accurate. Mr. Riley's looking at federal charges for wire fraud and money laundering. Relief flooded through me. What about Lena and Julia? Ms. Grant will probably plead down to accessory charges. She was involved, but not to the same extent as Riley. Ms. Voss is in more trouble. Turns out she's been running a similar scheme at her previous job. This is a pattern for her. Detective Chen closed the file and looked at me seriously. Mr. Keller, I have to ask, did you know they were planning this break-in? No, I said honestly. I thought they were both out of state trying to rebuild their careers. Well, they're going to have plenty of time to think about career changes. Breaking and entering, attempted evidence tampering, conspiracy. They're looking at serious prison time. Can I see them? She raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's a good idea? Probably not, but I think I need to. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in another interview room, waiting for them to bring in Lena, Connor, and Julia. When the door opened and they filed in, handcuffed, wearing orange jumpsuits, looking like they hadn't slept in days, I almost didn't recognize them. Connor had lost weight and gained a beard that made him look like a homeless person. Julia's perfectly styled hair was stringy and unwashed, her makeup smeared. But it was Lena who shocked me the most. The confident, ambitious woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. Hello? I said quietly. You son of a witch, Connor snarled. This is all your fault. Is it? I looked at the three of them, sitting across from me like defendants at their own trial. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you broke into my house to plant fake evidence. We wouldn't have had to if you hadn't destroyed our lives, Julia snapped. I documented your crimes and reported them to the appropriate authorities. That's not destroying your lives. That's called justice. Justice? Lena spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse and bitter. You call this justice? You had everything planned from the beginning, didn't you? The whole thing was a setup. What whole thing? The marriage, the job, all of it. You married me to get close to the company, then spent years gathering evidence to destroy us when it suited your purposes. I stared at her in amazement. Lena, I loved you. I married you because I wanted to spend my life with you. I took the job at your company because I wanted to be closer to you. Everything I did because I thought we were building a future together. Bees, Connor said. Nobody's that good at playing the long game. You're right, I agreed. Nobody is. Which is why I wasn't playing a game at all. I was just living my life, doing my job, and trusting my wife. Right up until the moment she chose you over me. Van, Lena said, and for a moment her voice softened. We could have worked things out. If you'd just talked to me instead of what? Instead of letting you embezzle company funds? Instead of letting you cover up inappropriate workplace conduct? Instead of letting you destroy other people's careers to advance your own? You did all of those things, Lena. And when I tried to hold you accountable, you tried to destroy me. And when that didn't work, you tried to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. The room fell silent. Through the one-way mirror, I could see Detective Chen watching us, probably wondering if this confrontation was going to provide any useful information for her case. What happens now? Julia asked finally. Now you face the consequences of your choices, I said, just like everyone else. And you? Lena's voice was barely a whisper. What happens to you? I go back to work. I do my job. I try to rebuild the life you helped me destroy. We didn't destroy anything, Connor protested. You spat in my face, I said quietly, in front of a room full of people. You told me my wife belonged to you. You tried to humiliate me, intimidate me, destroy me. And when that didn't work, you tried to frame me for your crimes. I stood up and looked at the three of them one last time. The woman I'd loved, the man she'd chosen over me, and the friend who'd helped them both try to destroy me. All eyes on them, nowhere to run. For once, Lena finally looked at me, and I didn't feel a thing. I walked to the door, then paused and looked back. You know what the really sad part is? If you'd just done your jobs, if you'd just been decent people, none of this would have happened. You could have had successful careers, happy lives, everything you thought you wanted. But you chose to be greedy, dishonest, and cruel. And now you get to live with those choices. I knocked on the door, and Detective Chen let me out. "How do you feel?" she asked as we walked back toward the lobby. "Tired," I said honestly, "but finished. Think they'll learn anything from this?" I thought about Lena's face in that final moment, the realization that she'd destroyed everything good in her life for nothing, that all her schemes and manipulations had led her to a jail cell in an orange jumpsuit. "Maybe," I said, "but probably not." I walked out of the police station into the cool December evening. Snow was starting to fall, dusting the sidewalks and making the city look clean and new. I had nowhere to be, no one waiting for me, no grand plans for the future. But for the first time in months, I felt free. 6 months later, I got a letter from Lena. She was in federal prison, serving a 2-year sentence for conspiracy and fraud. The letter was 3 pages long, full of apologies and explanations and promises to be a better person when she got out. I read it once, then threw it away. Some stories don't get happy endings. Some people don't get redemption. Sometimes the only justice you get is watching the people who hurt you face the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes that's enough.